This week, let me get to the point. This week is A Serpent's Tale by Ariana Franklin. This is a great hard copy. I bought this myself. Full on, I own it. I own the whole series. I think it had a little paper sheath cover, but I don't like to keep those. So I'll pop up a picture of what the cover looked like. It's a great cover. All of these books have great covers. This is ye old historical fiction. So, set in England, Henry II. I don't know what year those are. It's swords, it's horses, it's crusades, it's Queen Eleanor, it's all this fun stuff, right? So I got this one obviously because I like the series. Got to finish it off. Sadly, now, our lady, Miss Franklin here, has bit the bullet. She died. It happens when you're old. But I looked and I recently saw that I think her daughter wrote. Now, I don't know. I think her daughter wrote more in this series. Now, I'm like, I don't know what to think about this. Now, I first came into contact with this with your Brian Herberts here, right? Back in the day. You get all excited about Dune. Read about 6 of these books. If you read the last one, you know it's not finished. And so you go, let me get another one. You see this big Dune lettering. I didn't see this copy, obviously. But you see this big Dune lettering. You're like, give me that. And then you get a ways in and you realize your boy Frank isn't writing this, right? So back then, I got real sideways about it. But I'm not as sideways about it nowadays. So I might look into whatever her daughter wrote. I might look into that. I'm not sure. In any case, Serpent's Tale. Book 2, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5. It is a solid historical fiction. Historical fiction being set in a timeline, right? So if you did it in the Civil War or in England, then you have all the rules and you just float a fake character in amongst this and then sort of see what happens. This is historical fiction. These are very fun. If you like history, it's even more fun, right? But as a general story, it's a fun story. It's kind of like the Flintstones, right? Where you like to see these interactions, right? So how are they going to talk? And they talk in some kind of shell. Or how do they move their cars? They run with their feet, right? It's the same sort of energy in a weird way. Because we get our character is a well-trained doctor, but a woman. And just throw her in England where, they still believe in ghosts and witches and all this whatnot. You have constant fun interactions about this. Book 2 here, do you need book 1 first? It does a good enough job catching you up. It's not great. So if you've read book 1, it gets annoying. And I think if you haven't read book 1, you know what's happening. You know this is filling you in. So that's never fun. But it serves its purpose. If you found this, I only want to read the one book. You can read one book and be okay. It's self-contained. Obviously, more adds to it. But it is self-contained in that way. You won't be lost. You won't need the other books. You can read one and done. And enough happens different that, and again, the writing's good enough that you're emotionally connected to the characters, even in just one book. But if you've read the first book, you pick right up along with it. What is it? It's the fun of a series, I think, for readers, is that you get to hang out with these people in this extended time. Since we last left her, our Adelia, our doctor from She's trained somewhere in the Middle East. Has had a kid with old Bishop Rowley. So we get it's a good hot and cold kind of romance that's never really cold, if you know what I'm saying. It's two headstrong people. He ends up being a bishop. He would have not been a bishop if she didn't want him to, right? But she'd have had to be his wife, which she didn't want to be because the world the way it is, it'd have her cloistered, and she's a skilled doctor, and there's doctoring to be done and people to be helped, etc., etc. Our careers kind of situation, right? But she's still sour with him about it. So you get this great friction between the two, but they still like each other. It's obvious. She's been living happily out in the English countryside, just helping random people, when the call comes in, the king needs her again. This is King Henry II, the Plantagenet? I think I'm saying that right. Our fun begins. Okay, you hear a lot about this woke books, right? Woke entertainment, where we shoehorn whatever such and such into a story to make such and such point. This hits all the woke chimes, right? So if you put it in the wind, it would sound woke. But this is what I wish more authors would figure out. And I think this is a problem normal people have with woke things in their entertainment. I want to talk about, let's say you want to talk about women, improperly subjugated by society or whatnot. That doesn't work, let's say now, as much as it did in England in the 14th century or whatever, right? When we thought women would be ghosts and we'd stick them on a stake and burn them alive or something, right? And I'm not saying that there is not discrimination. What I'm saying is the story carries better in the proper time. So if you want discrimination, you don't put it in a sci-fi book, because in the future we will have fixed that. You see? That's why people hate New Trek. Star Trek's supposed to have fixed these base problems, and we're finding new problems to deal with. Right? So if you track back the same story and push it maybe into a different time zone, like this one is, then you end up hitting all the bells you want to hit in a way that's not obnoxious to the reader or pulling on your story wrong, right? Because that's really what annoys readers, is when, you read something and they're like, well, she wasn't allowed to be a spaceship captain because she was a woman. And you're like, bro, they wouldn't think this way 1,000, 2,000 years from now. We'd be done by this. We're almost done with it now. Right? Some woman engineer shows up on a job site and she's head of fixing such and such bridge. It's not like the town's going to have an upheaval. This woman's in charge. Town's like, is she qualified? Yeah, well then listen to her and let's fix the bridge, right? What's the big deal? There are pockets of Earth where it'd be an issue. But again, in 1,000, 2,000 years, that won't be an issue. And then we'll be floating in space having fun. But this one, those issues did exist. So here's a lady doctor in a world where men can't go in where women are. Women aren't allowed to, talk men issues. So we can't have a woman doctor. Who's going to listen to her? So she pretends her bodyguard, Mansour, a big burly guy from Arab land, is actually the doctor, and she's just an assistant. We play this sort of game. Of course, he doesn't know what he's talking about. He speaks in Arabic, and they all think, well, that, she's translating for him. And the good doctor, male doctor, says, take these herbs and I'm fine, when it's actually her, right? But she doesn't care because she just wants to heal people. This is our story. This is how it moves. And it works really well. Now, in the first book, she had come, events happened, but the Henry, our King Henry, is like, you're too smart and useful. I want you to stay. So she didn't get to go back to Italy or the Middle East or wherever it is she's from, which she's all right with. But it got me thinking because Peter the Great did the same thing, right? And this again, the fun of these books. You'll read a history where Peter the Great, a Swedish guy, comes and he's good at building bridges or, making an army work. And he's like, okay, I showed you how to do that. Now I'm going to go back home. And then Peter the Great's like, you're not technically allowed to leave yet because I don't want you to leave. And this is my kingdom. And then the guy's just sort of stuck there. Now, he's not a prisoner, but he doesn't get to leave, if you know what I mean. So it's like, I'd like to live at home, not that I have to live here. I'm getting paid really well. Everyone listens to me. But it is still annoying. And I always wonder at how that would be day to day. Can you imagine, like, you go to another town, right? And you fix somebody's washer. And then the mayor's like, well, you have to live here. What do you mean I have to live here? I don't live here, bro. Well, you have to because I'm not letting you go. And they're trying to the town treat you nice. I guess some people would be okay with it. I'd be highly annoyed. But this story gives us, like, we get to walk in the day-to-day of that happening. Because it happened to our character. She sort of moves on. Life happens. But it's this, I'm not going to say conflicted life, but it's in, what is it? It's an ideal, but not your choice. So it's an odd situation. The king calls her in because, well, the king hadn't called her. It's King's business, but it's her old baby daddy, Bishop Rowley. Now again, you hear bishop and you just think of a priest. But back in those days, those dudes would be wielding swords, running government, preaching in the weekends, and then running about doing other stuff. Which is what our guy does. A very manly man. It's what sells the romance here. It works. The romance works really well. A lady has died. A lady Rosamund, who the king loved, even though it's not his wife. Again, king's allowed to do this kind of thing. His wife's a Queen Eleanor, who's famous already, has had a bunch of other kids, but can't have any more kids. Right? So in those days, you worry about your standing, how things are going to pan out. What our bishop is worried about, our baby daddy, is it might start a civil war, right? Because if she, who doesn't want to be ousted or killed, starts plotting, things go south. Well, with this lady dead, everyone thinks she did it because there's all these advantages to putting one of her kids as the king instead of the king. And if everyone else thinks she did it, then she knows that's what people think. And she knows the king will think the same thing. And he's a hothead. And she might die. So rather than risk dying, maybe I'll just concoct a civil war, right? So he's trying to stop that from happening. It's this great backdrop. Because our main character, Adelia, only cares about her baby. Her sort of love affair with this guy. And any patients that come up. She's very to the book. She knows it's happening. She's not an idiot. But she only cares about what she cares about. And we get both sides of the coin here between these two. Love politics in England. It's always so convoluted. So he wants her to go find out how this lady Rosamund died. So that he can take that truth to the king, cool his temper, separate, the two parties before it turns into full-blown war. And we have We get a dinner, right? We get a dinner because as much as it was her decision to not be married, she's also still mad at him, right? And he's not like a pansy saying, well, it was your decision. He just accepts it. He takes her, sort of the dagger she throws at him. He takes it, sort of right to the chest. A manly way, if you will. It's very manly. So he's sitting here trying to explain this sort of political issue. And she's at the dinner and not even looking at him. Right? And so we get personal, interpersonal, and then sort of this political all at once. All just at a dinner. And they start to fit together. If your baby daddy's the governor, crap comes up, right? But that don't affect you wanting, time with him. It doesn't. Work doesn't affect feelings, right? Your feelings sometimes don't care. Your head understands. Your head understands that he has a job to do. That he has to go run FEMA. That these people have been, flooded out of their homes or whatnot. But your heart wants what the heart wants. It's a fun dynamic. All the characters are like this too. All the characters are very human, very real. We have these side moments with them. We get inner monologues. So, we'll have a conversation, like let's say her and an abbot, or her and a servant, or whatever, however we want to do it. In that conversation, we'll have their inner thoughts. Like, I feel sorry for this lady. She's, one of her friends is like, I feel sorry for her that she's stuck here. I don't know where the dog went, right? So it's just sandwiched right in another conversation, this inner monologue, which happens again in real life. You can be with hanging out with friends, knowing such and such happened in their life, thinking about that, and never saying it. And it gives this great undercurrent to all of our characters, this great insight. And it's quick, so you don't have to divert too much of the story in these long descriptions. It's compact. So that when I stick them in a dire situation, I really do not want anything bad to happen to these people. Right? And then because it's historical fiction, the bad isn't, right, like I'm going to suck your brains out, right? It's not this big outlandish, the nuke is going to go off and destroy the world. It can be as simple as one of them dying, one of them hurt, one of them lost. The story contains itself. I see so many stories where they think the stakes have to be world-ending. When if you shift our perspective right, it can just be about them. She's in the tower. I think this is a fake tower. In any case, it feels real enough. A tower with a maze around it. She's in this tower. She's looking at the dead lady, and the queen shows up, so she sort of hides because you don't know what's going on. And then somebody comes out of some curtains, old like Hamlet level, Shakespeare level, to try and stab the queen, and she saves the queen. She gets cut on the arm, on the hand, right? That could almost sound, what do we say, Mary Sue-ish, like a bit of a convenience for the story, because now she's instantly on better terms with this Queen Eleanor, who could be a problem. But nothing in the story, even when it sort of is convenient, feels that way, right? It feels natural. It feels like it works. Because of the writing. It pairs us in such a way, right? So, the incident. Be natural to hide. You don't know what's going on. The lady has armed people. But then her nature, I'm a doctor, if you see someone about to be stabbed, she reacts. So instead of seeing the action as a convenience, the reader takes the action as descriptive of our character, right? It tells us more about this person. Then it tells us about the queen, how she reacts to it, and so on and so forth. Her mercenaries, however that room interacts, right? So we don't take it as just, oh, well, this was convenient to move us along. We sit with the event, and then it fills in our world. This is why. It happens a few times here. Again, nothing's outrageous, but if taken individually, you could see it as a kind of a way. We then get the queen who, again, we're not sure about her, but she sees the cut. She stays regal the whole time. Almost indifferent. Almost like, oh, she doesn't care about anyone. But then you see this, she sees this cut, and she says, we who went on a crusade learned to deal with lots of wounds. There were so many hurt then. Again, simple dialogue, but now insight. This isn't a queen who just sat in her tower. Not if she went on crusade to the Middle East. Not if being there, again, being in crusades, you're in the Middle East. She then could have stayed where it's safe. She went down and helped, patching people up, learning to stitch people. It's nothing she had to do. No one would have forced her to. She chose to. It's a proactive queen, right? And that's what she does. She stitches up our Adelia very well, if not roughly, but well. Every character. And the Eleanor's not a main character, right? Not our crew, not Adelia, King Henry, Rowley, the bishop, Monsieur, her, like, I forget the name, Glinda, something like Glinda, her lady, her helper. These are what I consider our crew. They come from book 1 to book 2. Other people come in and out, but even the ins and outs get a depth, a realism and a depth. The mercenaries, they're mercenaries, but they also consider this Eleanor queen. You need to talk respectful to her. We're rough, we'll kill people, but treat her right, this kind of thing. Oh, wait, did I miss a part? I did miss a part. This is a side bit. Oh, wait. I missed a part. I'm going to go back a little. Before they head out, a secretary comes in, a type of secretary. And he's like, we're going to give you transport to and fro for this investigation, a winter cloak. He calls it firing, which I'm assuming is some kind of firewood. And it says $1 a day. That's what you're going to get for doing this service for the king. And again, you read other histories. I read a lot of English history. They do this a lot. And for me, it's kind of funny because you don't think about it, but I guess in those times it's an issue. Where like part of your payment, part of like the perks of doing a thing can literally be like a coat. Or they're like, I'm going to give you, this house, 12 coats, and 100 pounds sterling. And I'm like, the coats was part of the payment? And he might get 50 and then have to complain to some other guy about the other 50. And then you're stuck in some weird bureaucracy trying to haggle out your other 50 and you're kind of annoyed, but you can't say anything because it's the king. But then the other side can't not give you the coats because the king said he would. I'm like, we're talking about coats here? It's so funny to me. Just the mental of it. Because I've seen this, again, a bunch in actual old-timey history where they're like, you see what I did? I freed the land. I gave him a nice hat. And I fed all those people. And I'm like, hold on. Freeing the land, that's a big deal. Feeding a bunch of people, that seems like a big deal. Hat, who cares about the hat? But he carved it in stone to make sure everyone remembers that I gave Ted a hat. It's very funny to me. Very funny moment. I like it, though. Back to our situation. A lot of the book will spend a good chapter or two in more than 2 chapters. It's a good detective book. are Adelia. She's not quite, she's not Sherlock Holmes. She doesn't see everything, but she is smart. She's sharp. This is why the king wants her around. He can send her somewhere, and rather than get back, because in this story, that's how we make the king himself. He's a very forward-thinking person. So when everyone else hates Jews and thinks single women who wear black could be witches, he's like, look, just leave the Jews alone, and she can't magically turn you into a toad, right? So he's very smart in sort of a pool of idiots. Forward thinking. That's why he sees her and doesn't go, you're a woman, shut up. He says, you're a smart doctor, go out there and figure something out. Now, does he make it easier for her? He can't really. He can't change the whole world at once. And I think in history he does a lot. He sets in a lot of judicial changes that stayed with England. Property rights and this kind of thing. Which don't sound like much, but a civilization is structured a certain way. So without these changes, it just won't happen. So a lot of this book is this detective work, this Columbo style. She's walking around, interviewing people, helping some along the way. But it's her dissecting conversations, being perceptive about sort of ink usage on a paper. Like, this is a lot of ink. I don't think a woman wrote it. This kind of pure detective work. And in amongst it is walking through this history, right? This is why I like to read these kind of books. Same as I like space travel, the same as I'd like to hang out with dwarves in Lord of the Rings, I like also not just to be told history, right? There are facts. But then my imagination takes those facts and wants a little bit more. How would it be to live day to day? To wait for the bread? To be snowed in? How would it be if, 4 people show up and you got to find beds for them, or, these kind of threats? To walk around that century of England and see what it's like. That's what this character does, because being educated, she's a more modern person, so we see through her perspective and then feel these oddities, right? Like, you shouldn't treat a body this way. You shouldn't treat a woman this way. You can't just kick dogs. It's not right. Without being judgmental to anyone. That's the fun of this book. With this backdrop, with this queen, she's trying to get it so that her son can pair up with the king of France, get her an army, take out this other king, right? That's all. If this is what the angle is, she's just going to go with it. So in this, Adelia and her crew get caught up and taken. They can now escape. So you leave the maze tower, they chuck everyone on these boats, and then haul off on a river. And you're like, that doesn't seem bad. But again, it's the 14th century or whatever, and they're doing this in a full-on snowstorm. They're having to yell above the wind. We're worried about freezing to death in this boat. Very dramatic. But I think we are used to, if you have to get somewhere from point A to B, you can just get in your car, storm or no storm, unless it's massive, and usually get there. If you have the right vehicle, you can even go through the snowstorm, right? There's hardly anything that locks us down. But these people, again, you imagine being on a boat in the middle of a snowstorm. It's just a rinky boat. They have a tarp over them, essentially. It's canvas tarp. They almost freeze to death. Like, it's gotta suck. Her man, Rowley, she cuts him free and he YOLOs out mid-snowstorm. I don't know if he went in the water, if he just hit the shore. Mid-snowstorm, YOLOs out to go tell Henry of this queen's actions. Again, he's a manly man. And that's the other thing. We never stay too long in one of the sort of pies. It's never distracted by the history. We never forget the history to just harp on our characters. Both of them feed each other in a really good way. She ends up stuck in this abbey. Murders are happening all around. Everyone's freaking out. You're half snowed in. Right? It's its own fun dynamic. It's the detective part of the book. But it turns out in the end, it's the abbey. I mean, it's the abbot doing it. And he hired an assassin to kill Rosamund. And then the assassin has to cover his tracks. How do we know this? The assassin, the abbot is trying to get her because she found a letter earlier. He needs her to go find more letters in this queen's room with whatever skill she has so that he can continue propelling his war because he just doesn't like the king. And we get a great conversation with the assassin. These are the assassins I like. He's smooth. He's cordial, polite. He spills all the beans, you know. He doesn't need much prodding. He's a professional. That's how he says it. He's like, I'm a professional. I'm just doing a job. People need people dead. I just kill them. They're the reason. It's nothing to do with me. At some point, she goes, are you the one who's going to kill me? Because she thinks these people are going to kill her in the end. They probably were planning to. He says, I hope not, my lady. Kind of like. I'm like, he's just very cool with it. I like this assassin. I think he gets away in the end. In any case, a rule out there is, assassins should be cool with it. She's stuck up in the same tower with this crazy abbot. And in the end, our King Henry shows up, like out of the blue. So in this room where the Eleanor almost got stabbed, the person who almost stabbed her was the servant of Lady Rosamund, who had gone crazy because her lady died. She was in that room again, but this time she didn't stab the guy. She just snuck out. So he hears some issue downstairs and he leaves and locks her in the room. Then King Henry steps out. And when he comes out, it's the equivalent of a superhero for this book, this king. Because he is the king, carries himself that way. But he can make, you're sure like stuff can happen around him. He gives this confidence. He's cool. He talks to our character eye to eye versus a book of people looking down at her because she's the woman, right? But he's also a king, so it's not like she can order him around. But he's also fair, so as he doesn't brush her off, right? So if she's like, I was supposed to be paid for this gig, pay me this way. And he's like, you're hard to deal with. He comes in and save the day. Which, again, I think it happened in the other book too. He saves her in the end. It's this fun element. Our main evil guy, our crazy lady, had hauled a weird man trap out into the maze. And he got caught in it. Horribly died. So, people can horribly die in this book. But he was a bad guy, so no one cares. And everything ends up well. Again, king shows up, everything works out. That's the book. It's a fun book. If you want a break from what you're reading, if you're like, I want a taste of some history, but I don't know if I think it might be boring, do some historical fictions. They're fun books. All right, this isn't the longest video, but it's not the longest book. Ad time. My books. Here. Yes, buy those. I'm trying to think if I missed any points I wanted to make. I don't think I missed any points. I think that worked out. Okay, people. These are my books. You can go buy them. All proceeds go directly to me. Helps the channel. I'll spend it on stuff. Okay. Have a good one. I'll talk to you people. Talk to you a lovely lot next week.